after, about 15 years, that I began to say I must find a true teacher, that all the teachers that I have found, as great as they have been, for me, for this particular life stream, have still not been complete. They have not delivered this life stream into the ocean of truth. And so I made a very earnest and true prayer. And that was that I know the truth somehow, that some teacher, human or not human, somehow transmit to me the truth, even if all that I had hoped and believed was revealed to be untrue, even if this search for enlightenment or search for happiness, search for self, is revealed to be not true, just a myth, just some kind of metaphor to keep people happy until they die. Even that I was willing and had to know. So from that really true prayer, where I had no idea of how it would be answered, I was miraculously brought to my teacher, Gangaji, who lives in India. And I'd like to say I never had any desire to go to India. I was not interested in things Indian. I was not drawn to the Hindu way. I considered myself far too sophisticated for that kind of messy, devotional love. So that was not my interest, and I was quite surprised to discover that, in fact, my Satguru, meaning the guru that delivers truth fully to me, was a big Punjabi man in India. Quite surprised. When I got to him, by a miraculous set of circumstances, I somehow found myself in Hardwar, which is a town in India on the banks of the Ganga. I knocked on his door. He opened the door with his arms wide open and his eyes flashing truth, flashing such power, such force, such love that I was stopped in my tracks. And he said, "Welcome. Come in." And this welcome, this come in that he extended to me and continues to extend to me, I extend to you. It is the same welcome. It comes from the same source. And in truth, it is extended to the same self. Welcome. Come in. That was in 1990. And that began a stopping point for me. He saw in my eyes that I was thrilled to see him. And he said, "Very good. Come in. Now tell me what it is you really want." And I said, "I want freedom. I want to be free. Free of all my entanglements. Free of all my misconceptions." And he said, "Excellent. Very good. You are in the right place." And because of his power and the force of his personality and the strength of his grace, I recognized I was in the right place. It was a very lucky recognition. And so I immediately said, "Tell me, Sri Gangaji, what do I do? Tell me what to do. I'm ready to do it." And he laughed and laughed. He said, "Excellent. Are you ready to not do anything?" And I didn't at first know what he meant. So I said, "Well, yeah, I'm ready to not do anything, but now what do I do?" And he said, No, I mean not do anything." And still I said, Okay, I understand, not do anything. Now what do I do?" And he laughed and patted me sweetly on the cheek. And he said, "What I am telling you is to stop everything, to stop all your techniques to get anything, to recognize all of your strategies for achieving something, and to stop them." Of course, when I first heard this, I heard it on a relatively superficial level. I thought he meant if I felt like eating something, not to eat. If I felt like smiling at somebody, not to smile. He very quickly saw the limited way I had understood this, and he said, No, it has nothing to do with eating, smiling, sleeping, walking, talking. Nothing to do with that. It's much deeper. And I realized, when he pointed me in that direction, that the activity of my life was built around different strategies, and that these strategies, when I examined them, were built around this essential question, who am I? And in these strategies, I was continuing to look for the answer outside, so that if I could relate well with somebody, that meant I was someone good who was relational. If my relationships were not going well, that meant I was someone bad who was a failure at relationships. So I got to see in these first few days with him how much of my thought activity during a day or an hour even was revolving around this constant searching in some external reference point for who am I. And even when I got very good feedback that I was a good person, I was a true person, I was a spiritual person, I was still left unsatisfied. So I would continue to search more and develop more refined or sophisticated strategies. What he was telling me was to stop everything. And he told me in such a way that I could hear him, even though I fought what the direction was. I heard deeper than I fought. I experienced the truth of his being deeper than I experienced the validity of my strategies and the constant following of my thoughts. So by his profound grace, the mystery of grace itself, I was able to relax and simply be still, simply be in this very humble room on the banks of the Ganga in India. I was able to let go. What bliss. How funny, because really, whenever I had experienced any of this bliss before, I had always thought it had been because some strategy had worked. At that moment of giving up all strategies, I saw the absurdity of ever thinking that anything I had ever done had given me this bliss. In fact, when I had experienced this bliss before, in moments or glimpses, it had been because the searching for a moment had stopped. Just for a brief moment, the habit of acquisition had stopped. The conditioning of aggressive grasping had stopped. And in that moment, the indefinable, inexpressible bliss of being reveals itself. So I was thrilled. I recognized, at last, something that doesn't continue to feed more doing, more acquiring, something that stops that feeding. And for the next 2 or 3 weeks in his presence, I would simply come and meet with him in satsang, and we would take occasional walks around Hardwar, and I would revel in the bliss of beingness. At the same time, I must say I was falling deeply in love with this Punjabi Indian man and his power, and he recognized this also and would laugh at me and playfully slap me on the cheek. Once when I was waiting for him to come for a walk, I was sitting by the banks of the Ganga. I hadn't seen him coming, and he came up and he looked at me, and he saw that I was maybe slightly becoming a little sentimentally attached to him. He never has any problem with the outflowing of love toward him because he recognizes it is self to self. But the sentimental attachment he could recognize was something else, and maybe perhaps some beginning of a strategy to keep or to hold. And he laughed and laughed at me, and he said, "Look inside and tell me, who are you? Who are you?" And like a thunderbolt, I recognized I am that. I am that which I love. I am that which is loving. and I am beyond that. What a moment. Soon after that moment, I got maybe malaria, but some condition where I had a very high fever. He came to visit me and he said, "Don't correct the fever with medicines right yet. Let the fever burn through something." And in that time, that 24-hour period, there were many delusional or visionary occurrences where I could experience many lifetimes. I could experience myself identified as insect. I could experience myself as great, powerful yogi. Finally, he came to see me and he said, "Good, now you take some aspirin, you get rid of the fever, and see what remains." This was such a teaching, because in all of my searching, I had been looking for something extraordinary. I had been trying to hold some moment of expansion, some moment of truth. And in this fever, I had many extraordinary experiences, and then after the fever, all of those extraordinary experiences were finished, were gone. There was an echo in memory. I could recall them, but they were essentially gone. So I had to look deeper than any particular experience. I had to look at what is unchanging throughout any experience. I had to see that in all of my years of identifying with suffering and misidentification through definition, and all of my moments of great bliss, glimpses of truth, still there had been a continuous something that is really nothing at all, but a continuous presence that had been untouched by any suffering and untouched by any bliss. This was quite startling. He saw that I had seen that, and he was very happy. And when I saw him the next day, he said, "I dreamed of you last night, and I saw that your name is to be Ganga." And of course I was very happy about that, because so much of the deepest awakening had occurred on the banks of the Ganga. And he said, "Now you know that what the Ganga stands for, the purification of truth, that which floods the land with self-recognition, is your own consciousness." And he said, "I want you to go back to the West and share your experiences." I remember saying to him, "But how?" And he said, "You don't need to know how. You simply speak from your realization." At that point, of course, I became a little agitated, and I said, "I don't believe I'm ready. I don't believe it's time." And he said, "You leave that to me." And I am deeply grateful for his ruthlessness in not allowing my mind to diminish the power of the realization, because soon after that it was time to leave him in form, and I returned to California. After I had been in California for about 3 weeks, out of the blue, one night, it was as if a thunderbolt split open my mind and totally annihilated the possibility of lasting self-doubt. There was a moment where, without a doubt, it was recognized that all of life is the truth of who I am, that this particular mind stream that I have called myself is simply an object appearing in life for a brief time and existing because of life, and finally returning to life.